friends? Welcome back to my channel. I had an idea a couple of days ago and I am just going for it. I'm obviously not in any sort of formal setting, but I'm going to be doing some screen recording and we're going to be talking about a Goodreads feature that I have not explored yet, the Goodreads Explore feature. This is something that I've always wanted to do. I feel like Goodreads is such an interesting site because it never changes, it never really seems to have any updates to it, and there are a lot of features that I just don't personally use. The books that other Goodreads readers enjoyed feature, which I have done a couple of videos experimenting with a while back, but I feel like there's just so much more here to explore besides that, and then the like news and interview section, which I use quite a bit for my list videos. I noticed I came across this button recently. Looks a little bit something like this. Goodreads Explore. What is this? What is this function? What is this going to help me to do? Am I going to be able to find books I've never heard of before? Is this going to give me some like really wild and amazing recommendations? I have no idea, but we're gonna find out today. Hopefully find some new gems and some new books. I have no idea what this function looks like, but I'm gonna screen record and we're going to explore together. I noticed this feature first because I went to the browse feature as I normally do. I always go to the new releases and lists section of Goodreads most frequently because that's where I find my list video ideas, folks. I'm not very inventive or creative. I used BuzzFeed once and that was sort of a mistake, so now I rely on the news and interviews section of Goodreads. But let's go to the Explore section and get exploring, shall we? Okay, so the first thing that I'm seeing is an article in real big text here. Guaranteed reader approved summer page turners by genre. So I'm wondering if we should navigate to any of these news and interviews, because I know for a fact that these little titles here to the side too, these are articles that are already elsewhere on Goodreads, right? That doesn't feel like something that's been unexplored. So let's keep scrolling. Let's keep finding out what we've got here. Because you enjoyed Part of Your World. So this was a book that I rated 5 stars. I read this one recently and I'll talk about it in my upcoming June wrap up. Jeez, it's already June. And it is recommending me some books based off of this one. I guess this is kind of a similar function to Goodreads readers also enjoyed perhaps. Maybe I will select a book from this section. Keep scrolling though to just kind of get a feel for this page in general. So because you're reading Pillow Thoughts. Here's the thing, I already finished Pillow Thoughts, so I'm already starting to understand that Goodreads is slow as fuck in updating things. I finished that book yesterday and it hasn't updated yet. It still thinks I'm reading it. So I'm getting poetry recommendations based on that. Because you shelved by the book. This is a book that I have not read yet, but I put on my want to read shelf because I was sent advanced reader's copy of it. It's the new Jasmine Guillory book. So I guess I'm being recommended books based off of that one. And then Trending with Goodreads members. I like this one because I get to see what's like hot and fresh and new. I'm seeing a lot of stuff that I'm actually kind of interested in or have already read. Reviews for You, and I'm wondering like what this is based off of. I don't really have like any sort of information here on this section. Like what is it? Goodreads reviews of various different books that I can click on what these reviews are all about. And I can see, I guess, too, like who these reviews are from, if I'm following this person or friends with them, or like if I should follow them, I don't know. If we have similar thoughts on books, maybe it's help me find friends. I'm not really sure this function yet, but Reviews for You, and then if you scroll down, there's more news and interviews. Okay, so this seems kind of straightforward. How about we pick a book from each of these sections? We can select a book based on, you know, what shelves and what books I've shelved, and then I think we can look at the Reviews for You and maybe pick a book from there, because they've decided that I need to know who's reviewing books and what these reviews are. Perhaps they're pointing me in the right direction of a good read, so we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna explore together. Looking at my recommendations based on Part of Your World, I'm already seeing a couple of books that are on my TBR. I need to read Something Wilder, The Sweet Spot, and The Wedding Crasher for a list video that I'm doing later in the year, so maybe one of those. Let's keep scrolling. Also, The Bodyguard is one of my most anticipated romances of the year. The No Show is also on that list. We've got a lot of like good options here, but I think I'm gonna go with The Sweet Spot by Trish Dollar, simply because this one looks like it could be a better version of a Josie Silver book. This book right here I didn't like and I DNF'd it. I think it's a Josie Silver book that I DNF'd. The Sweet Spot seems like it might be a better edition of that, so let's go with this one. I'm kind of loath to pick one of the books here because here's the deal. I don't really like poetry, right? And the reason I picked up this Pillow Thoughts book was I was at Target and I was bored. I don't want to read any of these. I have not had the best luck with Ruby Core, so maybe Atticus Poetry. Let's see what the Goodreads reviews are on this one. I've never heard of this before. Instagram Sensation Atticus. Instagram Sensation's not really something I want to hear associated with a book. Fuck. Are y'all seeing this review? What in the hoobastank did I just read? You know what? Gabby read this in 2017 and gave it 5 stars, so I guess of the poetry books, we're gonna go with this one. Love Her Wild. I mean, I'm assuming Atticus is the name and poetry is just like, I don't know. Okay, we're going with this one. Next up we have Because You Shelved by the Book. Wait. See all. Mayhaps we should see all. Mayhaps we can find something better. Let's look at this. Okay. So similar books to Pillow Thoughts is how these books are categorized. Books that Goodreads member also liked. I feel like I am harkening back to the days of Goodreads readers also enjoyed, but you know, we're gonna keep scrolling. It's all just poetry. For some reason, just hoping and praying that there's something in here that isn't poetry. And that doesn't seem to be the case. So Xing out, we're gonna just go with The Love Her Wild, all right? We're gonna go with that. But it's good to know that if you need an expanded list of things, you can certainly find that. We're not gonna be doing that for any of the other ones, but we have options, you know? Next up, because you shelved By the Book. We have Something Wilder again. I don't love a repeat, but like, it's here. We have Dream On by Angie Hockman. This one I'm actually kind of intrigued by. I don't know anything about it. The cover's really cute, and I actually did enjoy Shipped last year, and we're gonna maybe explore that in a minute. Wedding season, I don't really want to read a book about a wedding. I already had one. Definitely not reading a YA book. The Bodyguard's not out yet, so I don't know. Let's look at Dream On by Angie Hockman. Okay, so not super promising in that I don't think this book is published yet. It's not, and it doesn't even have 4 stars. But let's look at the early reviews. Didn't have much interest in picking up Shipped, but fell in love with the cover for this book. Scrolling to the bottom for community reviews. So I know that Elena Armas and Abby Jimenez are authors, right? And they have to be like nice in their Goodreads reviews to other authors, but they both gave this book 5 stars. So I find that promising, and I think I'm going to read Dream On by Angie Hockman. Okay, so I took a second to read the synopsis of this book, and it sounds fucking bonkers, which is exciting to me. So it's about our main character, Cass, and apparently she develops amnesia from a car accident, but not only can she not remember things, but she is imagining a boyfriend that she never had, a man that does not exist, until he does actually exist. The real guy's like, yeah, sure, I'll date you, let's go on some dates. Yeah, I don't know, this sounds messy and weird, and I'm very much into it. So we're gonna read Love Her Wild, Dream On, and The Sweet Spot. Those are our selections thus far. Let's continue on. Trending with Goodreads members. I already kind of know what I'm feeling after looking at this list. I think it's pretty obvious. I've read People We Meet on Vacation. I've read Book Lovers. I don't like Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I've never heard of Emma Straub. Every Summer After. I feel like I've heard so many good things about this book. I don't know what it's about, but I've heard it's like, oh god, what's that Hulu, Amazon series that's coming out? Not Laura Jean. The other bitch. The Summer I Turned Pretty. For adults is what Every Summer After is supposed to be. So I feel like we need to read it. I feel like we're gonna have a good time. Let's do it. Now we are on to the reviews for you section, in which I am mildly terrified. So let's see which of these Goodreads reviews honestly can convince me to read these books, okay? I'm not reading A Shadow in the Ember, and I'm not reading Jane Eyre, so let's just get that out of the way right here. I'm gonna read the review for Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. I've never read an Agatha Christie novel, so I am not convinced that this is necessarily the best thing for me, and this review really just says this one is crazy, and then I can view spoiler. Should I view spoiler? I don't think so. It's a mystery, right? So that's not really convincing me. Candy. Fuck no to the Carrie Maniscalco. Don't want to get embroiled into a Brandon Sanderson novel at the moment. Here's the deal. Olivia, you make me want to read Glint by Raven Kennedy, although I know against my better judgment, right? Like, I probably should not pick up this book. I don't think I'm gonna enjoy this book, but I don't know. The review is there, and we're gonna keep scrolling. These people are preying on my fucking downfall. This is all like fantasy romance, and I just find that particularly hateful. I don't want to read any of these books. Keep going. 2-star review, not convincing. 1-star review, not convincing. Fantasy romance, god damn it. Okay, keep going. Surely there's something. Oh god. Quickly things are falling apart. 5-star review for this fantasy romance. Do I want to read this though? I don't want to read it. And yet, somehow, I am being convinced to read it. Candy, you bitch. I think I might read Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. I didn't think I would do it, but this book has 4.12 stars on Goodreads, and that's enough for me. It seems much more promising than trying to read a fantasy fucking romance. So we have quite the selection here. We have 4 romances and 1 mystery, and we're gonna have a grand old time, and we're gonna see how this Explorer functions. We're gonna see if what it's promising is promising. Am I making any sense in what I'm saying? No. But we're gonna see, okay, if I enjoyed Part of Your World, am I actually going to enjoy The Sweet Spot? Because I shelved By the Book, is By the Book going to be similar to Dream On? Am I gonna understand why they're recommending it? I don't know. Granted, I haven't really read that book yet. Maybe I'll read By the Book before this video, before I get into the vlog portion of the video so I can really compare. But you understand what I'm saying. Am I gonna think that Goodreads members are stupid? We're here to find out. Let's get into the vlog portion of this video. So we're off to a surprisingly decent start. I am 20-ish% into The Sweet Spot by Trish Dollar, and I didn't realize, but this book is actually connected to Float Plan, also by Trish Dollar. That one I read when I was gardening last year, and for some reason I just really enjoyed the story that I feel like otherwise I would have found very mediocre. It's about our heroine, or at least that one was about our heroine, whose fiance, I want to say, commits suicide, and she is dealing with the kind of like emotional repercussions of that. He left her his boat. They were supposed to go sailing the world together, and she ends up sailing traveling the world by herself until she meets a guy named Keen who she asks to kind of help her captain the ship because she has no idea what the fuck she's doing. And it was really delightful. I liked their relationship. The different places that they traveled to were, I don't know, just fun to read about. It felt very much like I was on my own tropical vacation, which I really wanted as I was gardening in my own home in Texas in the summer. Like, it's fucking hot outside, and the idea of being on a tropical vacation just sounded awesome. This book is much different, but it has the same nice, easy writing that I have come to really, I guess, like from Trish Dollar. So this story follows our main character, Rachel, who is the sister of the heroine in the last book. And Rachel is a single mom who is still kind of in contact with her child's father. He is kind of a piece of shit. She's like sometimes with him, sometimes not, romantically. At the start of the story, she's not really with him, and she is trying to get him to like step up and be a better father to his daughter, and he's just like not really getting with the picture. The child's been around for about 4 years at this point, so like he's had more than enough time to get his shit together, and he just hasn't. And also Rachel, she loves her job. She is in the hotel management industry. She works the front desk at a very fancy hotel in Miami, I want to say, but she lives in Fort Lauderdale. I don't know if that makes sense geographically. Maybe I was misreading things. I don't know the fucking geography of Florida, to be honest. But she unfortunately is fired because a patron of the hotel tries to assault her, and whenever she tells him to fuck off, he reports this and tries to get her fired, and she is unfortunately fired. She's trying to kind of pick up the pieces and figure out what she wants to do. She really likes her job. She doesn't want to, move into a different career field, which I think is nice. I don't think that I often see that in romance. It's usually like something bad happens and this person takes the opportunity to change their life or go in a different direction or is trying to find what they want to do next. And our heroine very much wants to work in the hotel management industry. Like, she is into this. She's good at her job. She likes what she does, which I like to see. She is just looking for a new opportunity. She does want to stay in Florida, but she does get an opportunity in Ohio, something that would essentially be more responsibility than her prior job. And she decides that she's going to take it. She's going to go out on a limb just like her sister, and she is going to move to Ohio sight unseen and manage this hotel until she gets there and realizes that the grumpy guy who hired her isn't even finished with the hotel that he is building. So she is not only going to manage this hotel, she is in charge of helping with the construction process, with sourcing materials for things like mattresses and bedding, getting to kind of help build this hotel from the ground up. And I think she sees it as an exciting opportunity once the shock of being lied to kind of wears off. Our hero, Mason, I think, is the guy who is, in charge of the hotel. She's going to fall for the owner and or builder and creator of this hotel. It sounds kind of boring. I feel like I'm getting bored just talking about it, but I'm actually interested in it. I just find the idea of like getting to help build a hotel from the ground up and getting to make all of the choices sounds kind of fun. And I do think that Mason is going to warm up pretty nicely to Macy, Rachel's daughter, who already has been kind of like funny throughout the story. I mean, she's not like true comedic relief, but she is fun, and I'm glad that we have her as an addition to the story. I don't know. It's not like groundbreaking. It's not incredible. In some ways, it does remind me of that book by, I think it's Beth O'Leary. Again, I'll put a picture of it right here. You know what? I'm gonna look. Josie Silver. I don't know. There's a couple of like British women who write books that I don't like, and here we go. Here's one of them. I think this one does have similar vibes in the sense that our heroine is going somewhere where she's never been before, where she knows no one, and it is pretty isolated, and so she's kind of stuck with one man. It's not similar in the sense that there's not like a super antagonistic relationship to begin with, but I kind of am appreciating the dynamic here better. So I don't know if that book appealed to you, but it was sucky, or you thought it was sucky, pick this one up instead. I don't know. Tentatively, that's all I have to say. And I can definitely see how this one could be recommended based off of Part of Your World, because it's another like small town-ish kind of romance, and you have a heroine who is trying to kind of like better her life and go for the things she wants, and I like that. So that's something that I like in stories. So far so good. So I finished the and it was quite cute, honestly. I can definitely understand why this one was kind of recommended based off of Part of Your World, because I do think there are a lot of similarities between the two books. I will say, like, this wasn't the super deep, heartfelt romance that I wanted it to be, given some of the kind of harder topics that are introduced at the beginning. Having a relationship with your child's father that can be a little bit stressful, having a hero whose daughter passed away, and like him having to deal with the grief of that and not really wanting to be around children. Like, there are some harder topics at hand in this book, but I just didn't feel like this book really went there emotionally as far as I wanted it to go. As a low-key fun summer read, I feel like this was quite enjoyable, and I do just like the outcome of the story. It felt very realistic to me. I understood our heroine's motivations, and even though my heart broke for her in that third act conflict, I really felt like the book resolved in a really charming way. I don't know, I liked this book. I had to pick it up for a list video, so I was going to read it either way, and I'm glad I got to read it for this particular video as well, and got to actually like sit down and tell you my thoughts and feelings feelings. I feel like they're not quite as in-depth as my feelings usually are on books, but this was just one of those ones where you stick in the AirPods, you listen to the audiobook, and you're like, this is pleasant to listen to. Feels like summer to me. And then at the end, you're like, okay, cool, moving on. Nothing super memorable, but definitely a pleasant reading experience. I think if you did read Part of Your World, I think this could potentially be a good book for you. And I would say in terms of this being a Goodreads Explore feature, I appreciate it because I got to read a book that was pleasant, that was a good time based off of a book that I did really enjoy. That isn't always the case, right? Like, I get a lot of recommendations from people based off of the books I like that don't work out for me. So for this part of this feature to work, I like that. And it definitely is something that I would use in the future going forward. So I'll be curious to see if that's the case for any of the other, like, based off of this book, pick up this book sort of thing. But I think this bodes well, given that I liked this book so much, Part of Your World so much, getting recommended this book as a result, I'm happy with. So hopefully, and I can't confirm whether or not this is actually something that will continue to be the case going forward, but I'm hoping that this is always a feature of the Explore page, that there will be books that I've given 5 stars to as the recommendation jumping off point, right? So like if I go to this page, I'm like, okay, I did really like that book. Let me find a book based on that. Overall, very pleased, but let's move on. Thought I would let you know how I am feeling about Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. I pop in and say that I'm like actually enjoying this book, which is sort of surprising me. I've never read an Agatha Christie novel before. This one is juicy. It's a little drama filled. I'm only like 20% in, but it is mostly about our main character. I want to say her name's Evelyn, but I know it's not Evelyn. Lynette. And Lynette is an heiress. She has a lot of money. She ends up marrying her best friend's fiance. Kind of scandalous. And now she's going to go on a honeymoon cruise on the Nile, and there are a bunch of other people that are going to be on this cruise as well, and I'm assuming someone's going to die, and we're going to try to figure out who done it. I'm assuming that Lynette's probably going to be the one that's murdered, and we're going to try to find out who wanted to kill her, because it seems like everybody that we've heard about so far has motivation to kill this woman. So apologies that clip was the worst thing probably ever that I've done for a secret TBR video. I had to pull that clip from a weekly reading vlog where I talked about Death on the Nile because I realized I never gave an introduction to this book before finishing it. So there you go. There were my initial thoughts. Unfortunately, this book didn't end up being that great for me. I do agree with the reviewer who said this book was crazy. It certainly was, but I felt like it was unfortunately too predictable. I called the whodunit aspect of this story pretty much from the jump. Like, it was pretty obvious what was happening, and I think that was disappointing to me. Not because it wasn't a realistic solve, I guess. It made sense. I just feel like it was a little bit too obvious, and I honestly wish that it had gone in a different direction. I don't know how to talk about this book really without spoiling it since it is a mystery, but I just felt like there were certain elements that were a little bit boring. I did correctly guess who would die. There were other people who died throughout the story too, which I think kind of made the stakes a little bit more exciting. But I think the way that the ending kind of worked out, not only did I not care for the whodunit aspect, I also just didn't like the way that everything was revealed in like one big rush of dialogue. I like a mystery where things are becoming unveiled throughout the story. I think it makes it all the more juicy as you're like unraveling things. And in this book, it was like people were dying, and then at the very end, protagonist, who we didn't know about at the beginning of the story, but I mean, I guess I should have assumed given the series. Our detective, he solves the murder or the mystery, and he like lays it out for us by telling it to a couple of people on the cruise. It just didn't feel that great. Like, it just didn't feel satisfying as a conclusion to a mystery novel that I've invested all this time into. And I say time, it wasn't like it was a super long book, but you're having to try to understand each character and their motivations, which I thought was kind of fucking pointless because I knew who did it. And I think if you pick up this book, you could probably guess pretty quickly who done it. And I don't think that the explanation for it was anything that I was like, oh, that's interesting. It was like, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense, like, fine. But it wasn't anything that I was like, wow, that's really intelligent. I mean, I think if any of the other characters had committed the murder or murders, it would have been more interesting. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. I just was a little let down by this, and it kind of makes me not want to read any other books by this author in the future. No offense, Agatha Christie, classic mystery writer. Maybe she has other books that are great, so let me know in the comments down below if there are some that are just like so much better than this one, or if you've read this one, hated it, and loved a different book by her. I would actually be willing to give her books a go, because I did feel like there were elements of this that really worked, and I did like the drama, the intrigue, and all the backstory into the different characters. I didn't think I'd care about the cast, but for the most part I did. I like was very interested to know people's motivations, even if it didn't turn out to be something that like totally worked in execution. So I am actually glad that I read this book, even if I don't know that this is a feature that I would utilize again in the Goodreads Explore function. I think that's really what it comes down to. And for this video in general, like that's the whole point, right? Does this feature offer anything interesting? Should Should you be using it? I don't really understand the point of the reviews for you section. I tried to do some research on what it's about and I really couldn't find anything. I think they just kind of like cobble shit together out of their algorithms or whatever. Not even algorithms, but like they look for the easiest things they can code and they're like, here's some people that you are friends with or follow or should follow. I mean, here's just people. Here are just people who review books. Here's some reviews. Maybe you'll like these reviews. In execution, I didn't love this feature, but that's okay because I didn't expect to like this feature and I feel like I had better luck with the last one, which I did expect to work better. So I think we're doing okay, all things considered, with the Goodreads Explore function. I have since started Every Summer After, which is a trending or popular book, and this one I want to talk more in depth about than any of the other books in this video because this is one that is so trendy and so hyped, and I want to become someone who buys into hype. I already am that person, but I do want to give my full thoughts and feelings because I know that a lot of y'all have actually asked me if I've read this book or if I liked it, so here I am reading it. This book is about our main character, Persephone, who goes by Percy, which is fucking terrible. She, much like Belly in The Summer I Turned Pretty, goes to a summer house or a cabin every summer. This is in Canada instead of the East Coast. She goes to her family cottage with her mom and dad every summer and she strikes up a friendship with two boys, Charlie and Sam. And their mom, Sue, not to be confused with Susanna from The Summer I Turned Pretty, Sue runs her own tavern or something like that where she makes traditional Polish food. I don't know why I'm feeling like this is relevant information, but I'm letting you know what I know about this book. This story is told in flashbacks and in present day. In present day, our heroine is given a call by Charlie, the eldest brother, and is like, hey, my mom died. Do you want to come to the funeral? Even though we haven't talked in 12 years. And she's like, oh my God, I loved your mom. Yes, of course I'm going to come to this funeral. And then we're given flashbacks. Percy's relationship with Charlie and Sam. And she was closer with Sam. They were like best friends. Charlie was the older brother who was like hot and unattainable. But it seems like Percy always really had her sights set on Sam. In the present day, I'm curious to see if Charlie or Sam is going to be the love interest. And I think that's going to be the crux of the story is like, who is she going to fall for? And is there going to be signs that Charlie liked Percy all along? Is Sam really the guy for Percy? Did Sam ever really like Percy? I haven't gotten far enough to tell. I'm like 15-20% in. I don't hate it, but it is eerily similar to The Summer I Turned Pretty, just like in a adult book, I guess. It doesn't feel very adult, I'll let you know that much right now. I haven't really gotten that much in the present day, so I guess that's unsurprising, but it's fun. I think it's a good summer read so far, but I'm not like, oh my God, this is just amazing and these guys are so hot, and like, no, I'm just kind of like neutral about it, which sucks because I was like really ready to be enveloped by this book. Also, I think if it's a popular book, the likelihood that you're going to feel like it's overhyped is stronger, right? I'm going to continue to read this, and I'm hoping that as I get farther in, I'm going to become so invested in these dreamy summer romances that like I'm gonna love the story, but we shall see. I've heard mixed things from my friends, so I'm not expecting that much, but I do hope to like this because I hope to like books. Alright, I am 50% into Every Summer After, and I have some boys behind me who are grooming themselves. If you hear any like weird ambient licking noises, that's what that is. I am feeling like this book is extremely mediocre, which sucks. And I was thinking like, maybe it's just me, and maybe it's just listening to this book in audio format, and, you know, I picked up a different book to read for a different video, and I was assuming I'd honestly feel the exact same about that one, but I was like, maybe I'm just in a mood, right? No, that book was really good. This one is just mediocre to me at the moment. The dialogue and format, I don't know. I just don't really care about the interactions between Sam and Persephone. I love a childhood friends to lover story. I don't know what about this book isn't clicking. You know, I'm trying to say it's the dialogue, and I don't even know that it's the dialogue because I'm thinking back to some of the conversations that they've had throughout the length of the story, and I'm like, okay, like these are fine, I guess. I think maybe part of it is that the interactions that I've been seeing between the two of them are like truth or dare situations, or them talking about like gory details of puberty with each other, and there's not a lot of like sweet, tender confessions or anything. Like there just doesn't seem to be a lot of like heart to the dialogue in the story. I don't know. I just don't care. Okay, so I'm gonna give it to you straight. I really disliked this book. I forgot I was reading it, to be honest. I was caught up in some other things for another video, and then I woke up this morning and I was like, is there something I can listen to on audio? Oh wait, Every Summer After. I didn't finish that. So I spent the better part of this morning finishing up this audiobook. I had 2 hours left at 3 times speed, so a good part of the book, a good chunk of the book left to listen to and to consume and to hopefully fall in love with. But unfortunately that didn't fucking happen. There was nothing to fall in love with. I understand why people enjoy it in the sense that it does have summery vibes. This is definitely giving me summer rom-com energy, but the execution was so poor, and it would be one thing if it was just boring, which is kind of what I was getting at the beginning, but it's not only boring at a lot of points, it's also just bad. The writing doesn't lend itself to getting you to love the characters and to love their relationship with one another. Sam and Percy are kind of unbearable to read about. They have this like unbreakable bond that is broken time and time and time again. There's this plot point that comes up at the end of the book that is the reason why Sam and Percy broke up so many years ago. And now that I'm thinking about it, now that I'm really trying to process this, it is nearly identical to the plot twist or plot point in Love in Other Words, but for some reason that one made more sense to me. It felt raw, it felt authentic, and I think that comes down to the writing. This book, I don't know what it is. It's hard to pinpoint because it's not like the prose was terrible. I think it is the fact that so much time is spent in the past, and yet we're supposed to believe that characters torn apart for 12 years should be able to fall back into each other's arms years later after something, in my opinion, pretty fucking egregious happens. Hard to accept, and I think Love in Other Words, there's a lot of time spent in the present with these two getting reacquainted with each other. At least in my eyes there was. In this book it didn't feel like there was enough time with these characters getting to know each other again. I didn't really find the flashbacks very exciting. I didn't like the choices that Percy was making. I didn't like the things that Sam was doing. And so it made it really hard to root for these characters. And I get that they're young, and I get that we're supposed to understand that these are just like, things that teenagers do, but it was just not fun to read about at the end of the day. Like in the beginning, I was sold on the idea, and then the farther the story went on, I was like, this is boring. Oh my god, what the fuck is this conflict? Are you kidding me? Stringing people along who don't deserve to be strung along. Just so much didn't work here. And also the underutilized brother. What? Like, why even have a brother? Except for, I didn't like this book. I'm realizing that this function, you know what I should do? Whenever I go onto the Goodreads Explore page from now on, to the future, into eternity, if I see a book listed under popular books that other Goodreads readers enjoyed, just ignore it. Just sail right past. If I see any books on there, I should just simply not read them. If they were on my TBR, take them off of my TBR, because I have been led astray so many times by books that other people find enjoyable. A lot of the books that were recommended as popular were books that I had no intention of picking up, or did pick up and didn't like. So I think perhaps these hyped rom-coms are things I should just stay away from. It's challenging, I think, from my perspective when picking up books, because I do have very specific tastes, but I think specific tastes are born out of reading so much of a particular genre. And in some ways, I'm jealous of people who don't read very often and get to pick up a romance and be so sucked in because they don't hardly ever read romance. That used to be me, right? That used to be me. That's not an indictment of people who don't read much or like don't have the time. If I didn't have a YouTube channel, I definitely wouldn't read this much. But it is hard to take recommendations when, it's like if you don't read a lot of romance, all romance is gonna sound pretty good. This one was not. Gonna leave it there. If you liked this book, I am happy for you. I'm glad that you got something out of it that I did not. I am gonna go ahead and read some fucking poetry next. As I'm editing my clips for Every Summer After, I realized that I harped a lot on the fact that this was boring and that it was unoriginal, but I don't think I fully talked about what I think should happen instead and what would have made this book an original story. I think up until this point, I didn't really know what I thought needed to change, but now I do. So let me tell you, I think this book would have been much interesting. I'm gonna go ahead and put a spoiler warning right here because I'm gonna talk about what happened at the end of this book. So if you don't want to be spoiled, here's your warning. I think what would have been interesting is if instead of getting with Sam in the present day, in a totally predictable move, I think it would have been much more interesting had Percy actually ended up with Charlie. Maybe realizing that he liked her all along, having flashbacks of like tender moments that they shared, sprinkled in throughout the last part of the book would have been interesting. Moments of him kind of like pining for her and her not really like realizing how much he cared for her, and then having them like spend time together in the present day and her realize like, wow, he was there all along and he's actually the one that I should have been with. That would have been so cool in my opinion. And it's not even that I didn't like Sam as a character, although I did find him kind of boring and a little bit predictable. I just feel like the book as a whole was uninteresting, and this is a story that's been done a million times and this is not unique at all. So I feel like you gotta have some sort of differentiator, and there really isn't one here. So I think had that been done, been fucking cool. So that's just my idea. I'm not saying reread the book, it's published at this point, but if someone wants to write an original childhood friends to lovers story, there's my idea. There's my pitch. So I think we all know that poetry is just not my thing. I think I said it at the beginning of this video. I think I've made it clear in all of the rest of the videos that I have ever made when I've had to read poetry. This one in particular was my least favorite poetry I might have ever read. And it's not because it was like,
No, it was because it was bad. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. This was bad in the sense that it was all Instagram captions and it was no substance. And I know a lot of poetry feels like that, but I think Rupi Kaur at least does attempts at like metaphors and imagery and like things that are going to at least give you the illusion of a poem. Atticus, it didn't bother. It really did not bother. Literally all of the poems, except for 2 or 3, felt like Instagram captions. And the ones that didn't were because they were too long. And I don't mean like too long in terms of, a poem. Too long for an Instagram caption. I don't think I have much of substance to say. I'm going to leave a link to a review that I found fucking hilarious in the description. I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's a fucking funny review. I was trying to like come up with funnier things to say in my Goodreads review, but like I can't outdo this review. It was really, really good. In terms of whether or not this function works on Goodreads, I think it's kind of challenging to say because I was already reading a book for a video that I didn't really want to be reading. So does this Goodreads function work? I think yes, because I disliked this poetry as much as I disliked the other poetry that I read. I think I'll have to revisit this one. This is a function I think I'll revisit next time I use the Goodreads Explore page, but it's all going to be dependent obviously on what book you read last, because that's what this one was, right? Like based on the last book you read, here's some more shit that you don't want to read. If it's a book that you did like, ostensibly you would get recommendations for other things that you could potentially read that would be good. I think it's like a Goodreads readers also enjoy sort of function. It's just a little bit different. So another function down. Now for the last one. I have started but haven't gotten very far into Dream On by Angie Hockman. We have at the opening of the story our heroine having dreams about her boyfriend Devin. We're soon to find out that Devin is not a real person because our dear, dear heroine is in a coma that she is waking up from, and I just stopped at the point where she is waking up. I will report back when I know more, but so far I am maybe most excited about this book compared to the rest. So fingers crossed that we get higher than a 3-star rating. Otherwise, I'm not saying otherwise like the functions here are like stupid or you shouldn't use them, but I feel like we haven't had like that much success. I mean, we had more success at the beginning, but I'm gonna read this book. I'll update you.
So my days as a Goodreads Explorer have come to an end because I officially finished Dream On today, and I figured we could talk about that and then also just talk about this experience as a whole and like what I recommend if you're gonna go on this page and take recommendations from it. So I had intended to update you on Dream On at the 50% mark because that's something that I typically do. However, at the 50% mark of this book, I was struggling. I had no idea how I felt about the romances, plural, that were going on, and I just didn't really know how I felt about the book as a whole. I was just feeling very uncertain, and I will say, even after finishing the book, don't know that I have like the firmest feelings, except for an extreme dislike of this book. It's one of those things where I can't entirely pinpoint what about this book didn't work for me, and I tried to kind of work through those feelings by going on Goodreads and looking at reviews, and I don't necessarily agree with the things that people didn't like. Most people don't like love triangles, right? That's fair, I suppose, but that's not something that typically keeps me from picking up a book, so I don't know. Okay, I'll try to articulate. It might not be eloquent, but like I'll try to. The issue here was not the love triangle, which was pretty obvious to me from the very beginning of the story. My issue was that this story was flavorless. It was so bland. I didn't care about our main character Cass. I didn't care about her life or her career struggles. It felt so flat, and even though the story was technically from her point of view, it felt like all tell and no show. So often, whenever she is describing the guy that she ends up with, she's like, he's such a good guy. He is good match for me. He is so sweet and tender. He likes making bouquets of flowers. Okay, cool. I don't know, I feel like I've been reading so much good romance lately that this one was just so glaringly bad in comparison. And it wasn't that it was the worst thing I've ever read. I was gonna say there's nothing in it that's offensive. There kind of was. But it's not like it was just the worst thing I'd ever read, or the romance component was terrible. It was just so fucking boring and flavorless. And it's interesting that a book with this kind of premise that is kind of interesting, it's like a girl goes into a coma, dreams that she has a boyfriend, and then wakes up and that man is not real. That is interesting, but it's actually been done better by other authors. And I know you're probably sick of hearing me talk about Elizabeth O'Rourke at this point, but Parallel has a very similar premise minus the coma, and I think it's resolved in a much more interesting way. I was hoping that this book would take a similar approach with the twist. It does not, and I don't want to spoil like what the answer to the twist is, like how our heroine knows the hero, or like how she's had these dreams or whatever premonitions of for the guy that she's like dreaming of. Anyway, it was not handled in a way that I thought was like fun. I mean, there were twists here, but I didn't think any of the twists were good. And I think something that I would like to point out is that there is another character in this book, a side character that plays a pretty integral role in the plot of the book, who is demonized for having a miscarriage, which is a strange take. I don't think that was the author's intent in this book, but one of the characters in the book thinks that this other character is lying about the fact that she was pregnant. And in fact, she was like in the process of miscarrying at the time. There was resolution to that plot line, but I was like, why is this included? Like, this is just, no. I'm gonna stop there. I just didn't like it. It was not good. In terms of the Goodreads feature that this one was based on, it was like, because you shelved Buy the Book, which is a book by Jasmine Guillory that I have still not read yet. Even though I said I was going to read it for this video, I still haven't read it. I can't tell you whether or not that was like a good recommendation, but I would say in general, I don't know that this is a feature that I would run or rush to use, simply because if you've shelved a book, that doesn't really tell you about other books, you know what I mean? Like, if you have not read a book, why would you pick a book based on another book that you have not read? It's just like on your want to read shelf, you know? And it doesn't like tell you, oh, because you put this on your want to read shelf, or because you shelved it on this shelf. Like, it doesn't say anything like that. It just says, because you shelved this book, you should read this other one. I don't know. I just don't think it's like the most useful feature. Which leads me into the final part of this video, which is to kind of briefly run through the features that I think are worth using and the features that I think are maybe worth a skip. I think there are really only two features here that I think are worth revisiting, things that I would definitely use in the future. The first one obviously is because you enjoyed. I don't know what the parameters are for this one. I'm hoping it's based on star rating, and like maybe if you have a 4 or 5 star rating, books will be recommended based on that. So because I enjoyed Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, I gave that book 5 stars. It recommended The Sweet Spot, which I felt like was a pretty apt recommendation based off of that book. It's a feature that I would use in the future. I would especially like to see like an indie romance that I, loved and gave 5 stars to on Goodreads, like what indie romances that it would maybe recommend based on that. I think that could be a useful thing for me. I also think the because you're reading feature could be good, again, because if you're reading a book and you're really enjoying it and you're like midway through the book and you're like, shit, I need to find something just like this, something that's gonna fulfill this need for me after I finish this book, I think it would be cool to maybe use this feature. Now, I have a hard time recommending this feature because I took the recommendation off of a book that I didn't enjoy. I was like halfway through a poetry book, or I had actually just finished a poetry book, and they recommended me more poetry. And I think that the recommendation was good because if I had liked that poetry book, you know what I mean? I talked about it earlier, you get what I'm saying. But I think those are the only two features that I would really recommend using. I don't really understand the purpose of the because you shelved feature. It just doesn't fully makes sense to me. Like, okay, I shelved a book. What does that say about my taste in books, and why are you recommending me books based off of that? And the other two features on this page, to me, I don't really understand the purpose at all. Like, trending with other Goodreads members, I guess if you want to see what's popular, that's definitely a way to find something new to read. But I think I would recommend people to go to the news and interviews section instead, or go to the actual list function on Goodreads, because I think you can find like new releases a little bit easier there, and or the news and interviews, like they break down, here's some tropes, and here are some book recommendations based on that. Like, people actually curate those themselves typically. Those are written by real human people, so I feel like that is maybe a better tool to use than just this like generic, oh, this is trending with Goodreads readers. I don't know. And the last one is reviews for you. I keep looking to the left because I have my notes to the left. The reviews for you section I think is probably the most nonsensical feature on this page in the first place. Like, what am I supposed to be gaining from this? I don't know who these people are recommending me these books. Some people are my friends, some people are not my friends, and these books have pretty much nothing to do with any of the books that I've read. So it seems weird that this is a feature at all. Like, how am I supposed to be, what am I exploring? You know, uncharted territory? I'm not really sure, but this is just not a feature that I think is useful in any way. I did have an enjoyable time doing it. This is a feature of Goodreads, or a page on Goodreads, that I have always been interested in figuring out and trying for myself. And I do think it might be, useful and interesting in the future to use some of these functions. And I definitely could see myself using, again, those like first two functions that I mentioned. Everything else, I'll probably just ignore. So hope this was entertaining in some way. I hope you enjoyed the thumbnail that I made Hayden take for me last night. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you're looking for more things to watch from me, or you want to listen to me talk for 1 hour and 6 minutes with Hayden about City of Bones, I'm going to leave a link to that in the description down below. I posted that at a really strange time, so I feel like fewer people got to see that than typical. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I love you so much, and until next time.